All right, what's up, my friends? I have come to you today after playing a lot of Killing Floor 3. And while I do end up pretty positive about it, I do feel mixed about it also. And I'll explain why that is. And first of all, I want to discuss how I really enjoy when a sequel does something different and tries something new. I think being a sequel incurs a certain amount of responsibility that you aren't just doing the exact same thing as the last game. Now, there are certain exceptions to this rule. Some games that have just done it so well that why wouldn't you do that again? Because people wanted more of that. Now, I do feel like Killing Floor 2 could fall into that category, but doesn't quite hit that category, and it had some room to improve. Now, whether Killing Floor 3 improves on everything is up for some serious debate. So, let's get into the positives first before I tear it up in the second half of this video. I really like the look of this game. And to some who have played the beta, that might seem like blasphemy, but they took this from the previous almost clean version of Killing Floor, took it back to the drawing board, and really grimed it up. I love the environments, and there's some really good environmental storytelling going on in each one. So I do give it points for having a good presentation. I also enjoy the look of a lot of the enemies, with maybe the exception of the foreskin Zed that you will be fighting a lot. I also think the music in this one is still fantastic. I still love popping into the main menu and just kind of being like, yeah, that sets the mood. I enjoy the main theme of this game. And I also appreciate the fact that while you are in game, you will be hearing the original, like Killing Floor 2 menu music, and that is always a banger. The gore in this game is very important to me, as I think Killing Floor's main draw is that it is a gore fest of a shooter, and this did not disappoint. Even when just running up and using a knife against your enemies, you can just cut them into tiny little pieces, and explosions are just as satisfying with gore and limbs flying everywhere. It is really fantastic, although I really do miss the Gibbs and fluids feature of Killing Floor 2, where you would send intestines and whatever else flying all about. The guns in this game that you'll be exploding and shooting things with also feel pretty darn good to use, with the exception of a few that I do feel could be balanced a little bit on the top end, brought them up a little bit, just so it feels like you don't have to empty a full clip to kill something a little smaller for then having to reload all the dang time. That's a little frustrating, but other than that, everything feels good to shoot. And on the topic of guns, one of the biggest changes to this, which I personally really enjoy, is the crafting system. Throughout your matches, you're going to come across little destructible things in your environment, like cameras, circuit breakers, signs, and antennas, and things like that. Will give you tons of different crafting materials that you can then take to your home base and craft muzzle attachments, sights, clips, like larger drum mags, different kinds of ammo, and even different firing modes for your guns, really personalizing it and making your own. And these crafting items can also be upgraded to then work even better and better, therefore giving you more of a clear sense of when you should be pushing those higher difficulties. Spoiler alert, it's when you have upgraded everything, because the higher difficulties on this are actually pretty damn hard. Another huge change to the game, which kind of falls in the middle category of being both a positive and affecting the game kind of in a negative way, which I'll get to, is the tools and gadgets system. I do enjoy this system, and I do like how they've implemented it, with a few exceptions that make a big difference in the overall game. But when it comes to the positives, the tools are very useful. I like the selection of them and that they are part of your kit. Some tools can be used to put a lure out to distract Zeds for a little bit. Some are like shock traps that you can put down on the ground. There's other ones where you can run around and activate turrets and activate environmental hazards. Others are simple as throwing an ammo bag on the ground. But there's one in particular that I have noticed that is causing some issue among a good part of the fan base, which I don't personally feel is a huge negative. But one of the tools gives you stims, and that's because stims that you can use each run is limited to 2 or 3 depending on, your upgrades and things like that. Some people feel very strongly about this, but for me personally, I do think that having a limited number of stims kind of pushes you to be a little more urgent, a little more careful with what you're doing. As in Killing Floor 2, you really could just run around and just become a freaking stim addict and just hit that thing as often as possible the moment it was cooled down. But here in Killing Floor 3, if you have a medical dude on your team that you could drop some stim packs on the ground, that is awesome. And it feels like, oh yes, thank you, man. Thank you so much. So I don't honestly hate it. I think it can bring some tactility and some strategy to your rounds, but I do understand why some people do not like it. On this subject of tools, though, I do want to start the negatives with it because one of the tools replaces the welder from Killing Floor 2. And if you haven't played Killing Floor 2, let me explain. Killing Floor 2, every time you run through a door, if you need a second to breathe and to figure things out, you can shut a door, whip out your welder, and weld that sucker shut to give yourself, a little bit of time to figure things out. Especially useful with bosses and funneling them into certain areas if you don't want to fight them where they are and you want to fight them somewhere else. That is a lot more limited in this, as the welder and like that welding mechanic is now a tool and you can only use it a few times. I do think this is a big mistake. I do think the welder needs to be with everyone at all times, because I do think it pushes people to kind of all use the same tool, especially if they are Killing Floor 2 fans, which, why wouldn't they try out Killing Floor 3 if they love 2? They'll be super off put by the fact that they just can't do this thing that should kind of be intrinsically with each character, so that everyone can have a say in the strategy of the team and can make some last minute decisions that could save the entire team. And with that, let's talk about the most hated feature of this game, and that's that it has classes, or in this game they call them perks, which is kind of odd because let's just call them classes, that's what they are. They have perks on them, but yeah. This system does really limit the customization, especially if you want to play a certain character and you want to play a certain way with that character. You can't. If you want to play as DJ Scully, which, a lot of people do, he's a mainstay and a classic character, you have to play Commando, period. That is not negotiable. Now, that is just annoying, and I don't really see how this would help in the context of the game being appealing to people. I do see how it is appealing to the devs on the dev side in order to balance the game a little bit, but you really gave up something here, and I think it does need to be decoupled, like the perks from the characters. And thankfully, when looking at the roadmap for this game, that is planned on a future update to decouple perks from characters, which, thank God. I almost wish you guys would have just delayed the game and just done that before releasing it. I think this game would be in a much better state, and a lot of more people would be willing to give it a try if this wasn't a thing. I think the best thing about this system, though, is the tools that you will get with it, which I mentioned earlier. The tools come in, different varieties depending on what you're using. As, for example, the Commando, which is DJ Scully, has a little turret bot that you can just pop out and it will just annihilate enemies in front of you or get some good damage on a boss. And even later in your levels, you can unlock, damage resistance and things like that, customizing how this little drone works. Another example is the medic class, or medic perk. God, I hate that. It's so hard to get used to. You will have basically a dome that will heal everyone in a radius, kind of pulling the team together to kind of make a last stand of sorts if everyone is struggling. I do like that part of this class system, but I don't think that they need to be tied to certain characters or perks. I think it would be really cool to mix and match these a little more. Thankfully, gadgets that you use aren't tied to each class. You can use whatever gadget you would like, but with how they're set up, you are kind of pushed to use certain ones over others, as if, like, you're the commando, you definitely want to have ammo on you, and if you're the medic, then you definitely want to have the stims with you. Like, it just kind of pigeonholes you into certain roles, and I do think that is, antithetical to how people want to play Killing Floor. A kind of neutral change is the fact that it also brings in a battle pass, and this alone will scare people off or just piss them off altogether just by being in the game. So I do want to talk about this. Its inclusion is extremely polarizing for the Killing Floor fan base. For me personally, a battle pass included in something doesn't immediately have me in a tizzy. However, it's when you monetize your game alongside that battle pass and how you do it that matters. And here, it could be done better. I haven't looked into whether these are just sticking around or if they're going to reset, but I really hope these do stick around so that you can just work on them in the future. That would be the most optimal way for them to do these. However, my biggest issue with this is how it brings in the paid battle pass and kind of mixes it in with the core games battle pass. This is so awkward, and I don't know why they did this. It should just be two separate tracks, one paid, one free. Because as it is, as you're unlocking things, you're getting, points to unlock certain things in your pass. There's this Nightfall pass stuff that can't be unlocked, but when you unlock it, it can be reserved. So you've wasted a point basically to unlock an item because you need to buy the first 4 to get the 5th on any said page. But you're just reserving them. You're not actually gaining anything. So it's just taking up your points and slowing your progression of the core pass. This to me is baffling. I don't know why this is a thing. And it just slows down the pace of the game and slows down the pace of unlocks, just like the leveling system does. And I feel like if they separated these two things, consolidated it a little bit, so you didn't have to reserve these things, it would be so much better. And to those who would just like to play this free and not have to buy it and just earn that, well, you're going to be waiting a long time if they even add another free pass, because there is not a way to get all of the currency in the core pass. And even if you do, it's not enough to buy the Nightfall pass at all. So you can't get started on that kind of train that other things like even Fortnite has, where you can just play through a pass and have enough to get the next one if you go all the way through. It doesn't even have that going for it. So I do think this needs to be tuned a bit and changed, and I hope they kind of jump on this quite quickly, because it kind of feels a little predatory, to be honest. It kind of just pushes you to buy it in every which way. I don't like it, and it kind of just puts a stain on the game that doesn't need to be there. Lastly, I do want to talk about PC performance. It's not as bad as a lot of other games coming out, especially when looking at the also similarly timed release of Wu-Chang Fallen Feathers, which absolutely runs like dog shit. So the performance can be hit and miss here, and that is kind of due to the inclusion of Lumen, global illumination, and reflection. The visuals can be very mixed depending on your graphics card and your capabilities here, because without the use of Lumen global illumination or reflections, it doesn't really hold up very well. The actual in-game shadowing and ambient occlusion doesn't quite hold up on its own without using Lumen global illumination. The reflections part of it can easily be turned off and not really lose too much, as the Lumen reflections, even though they're super costly and cause a lot of stutter and slowdown, they don't even look that great. They still look very blurry and inconsistent while even on the highest settings. So I'm not really sure what the goal here with the including Lumen was, but I think you kind of missed it. So personally, even though I kept Lumen on, I had it turned all the way to low just to give me an extra bit of shadowing where the in-game shadows weren't quite holding up as well. But I am kind of baffled at the kind of crutch that they seem to be when it comes to this game's visuals in particular. And while using them, you are definitely going to need something like DLSS or even FrameGen on lower cards, like lower 40 series cards anyway, to get a consistent frame rate, which is kind of a bummer. Lastly, I want to talk about the netcode. Sometimes in the multiplayer, it can be really hit and miss. Sometimes I'll have games that are fantastic. They feel good, and my bullets are hitting. Registration doesn't seem to be a problem, and lag doesn't seem to be a problem. But on others, it is awful. My bullets seem to just disappear into thin air. Enemies seem to teleport around a little bit, and the performance of the game does tend to just drop drastically when in multiplayer matches. So I do think it could be optimized a bit more in that area. But thankfully, just like I talked about earlier, the roadmap for the game has a specific section where they said they're going to be working on optimization for the game. Again, y'all could have just delayed it and had a better game on release. And as I bring this review to a close, I know it's been kind of a long one. I had a lot to say on it. I can't help but feel that even with everything I like about this game, and I do enjoy playing it, I feel like some things have been lost. A kind of signature tone and goofiness that the previous two titles had in spades. Apart with some witty banter from your characters here and there, the game has this kind of tone shift that leads into being more super hardcore and serious, and I can't really see any like goofy levels like the log cabin into where you're a miniature, or the Christmas theme levels where you were fighting Krampus and things like that. Those things to me feel like they wouldn't fit in here, so I do wonder if Tripwire will ever even bring those kind of goofy things into the game. I really hope they do, but I do feel Killing Floor lost a little bit of its soul here. What do you guys think? Is this a great game? Is it just good? Is it just mid? And are you going to stick with it, or are you just going to go play some Killing Floor 2? Let me know in the comments below. Subscribe if you want to hear more from me. Like the video if you enjoyed this. I will talk to y'all later. Peace.